Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more wild tales like this one. You won't believe what's coming. The voice is warm, a little husky, like someone who's seen a few storms and lived to laugh about them. Picture this, me, standing in my garage, a paintbrush in one hand, a chair I swore I'd fix up in the other, and a family that's about to turn my little DIY project into a full-blown circus. My kids won't talk to me, my grandkids think I've lost it, and somewhere in the middle of it all, there's a man with a smile that could melt ice, and a secret that could burn the house down. How did a can of paint and an old chair unravel everything? Let's dive in. I've always been a fixer. Not in the big, heroic way, more like the I can't stand seeing something broken way. So when I spotted that chair at the flea market, all chipped wood and wobbly legs, I saw potential. It was upcycled gold, I told myself. A little sandpaper, a fresh coat of paint, and it'd be the centerpiece of my dining room. My daughter, Lisa, called it a thrift store tragedy when I dragged it home, but I didn't care. I had a vision. The garage became my sanctuary that week. I set up a tarp, cracked open a can of sage green paint I'd been saving, and got to work. The first brushstroke felt like a promise, smooth, steady, like I was painting over all the mess in my life. My kids hadn't called in weeks, not since that blowout over Thanksgiving when Lisa accused me of favoring her sister, Jen, and Jen stormed out saying I was too old to meddle. My grandkids, well, they barely looked up from their phones when I tried to bribe them with cookies. But this chair didn't judge me. That's when I met him. I'd left the garage door open to let the fumes out, and there he was, tall, silver hair swept back, leaning against a pickup truck like he'd just stepped out of a magazine ad. "Nice color," he said, nodding at the chair. His voice was gravelly, warm, and I fumbled a paintbrush like a teenager. "Thanks," I managed, wiping my hands on my jeans. "It's a work in progress." "Like most good things," he said, flashing a grin that made my stomach flip. He introduced himself as Cal, said he'd just moved in down the street. We chatted about paint brands and flea markets, and by the time he left, I'd forgotten all about the chair. I didn't notice the paint dripping onto the tarp, pooling like a little green lake. I didn't notice the can I'd left too close to the edge either. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. The can had tipped over in the night, spilling sage green paint across the garage floor, seeping under my car, and, somehow, splashing onto the chair in wild, uneven streaks. It looked like a crime scene. I cursed under my breath, grabbing rags and a bucket, when Lisa's car screeched into the driveway. "Mom, what the hell is this?" she yelled, storming in. She was holding her phone, waving it like a weapon. "Jen says you're selling the house? That you're moving in with some guy you just met." "What?" I dropped the rag, paint smearing my fingers. "I'm not selling anything." "And what guy?" Jen heard it from one of the neighbors, some silver-haired creep who's been sniffing around. She's freaking out, says you're losing it. Lisa's eyes darted to the chair, the paint, the mess. "Is this what you're doing instead of talking to us?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Lisa, I'm painting a chair, not planning a wedding. And I met the guy yesterday. His name's Cal, he's new, and that's it." She crossed her arms, unconvinced. "Jen's on her way over. She's bringing the kids. This is a disaster." "Great," I muttered, scrubbing at the floor. "Just what I need, a family reunion in a paint swamp." By noon, Jen arrived with my grandkids, Mia and Ethan, in tow. Jen took one look at the chair and snorted. "This is your big project? It looks like a toddler attacked it." "It's avant-garde," I shot back, trying to keep it light. Mia, all of 12, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Grandma, you're so weird." Ethan, 9, just kicked at the paint puddle and giggled when it splattered his sneakers. "Stop that." Jen snapped at him, then turned on me. "Mom, we need to talk. Lisa says you're spiraling. This chair, this guy, what's going on?" I threw up my hands, paint flecks flying. "I'm not spiraling. I'm fixing something. And Cal's just a neighbor who likes my taste in paint. Can we all calm down?" But they didn't. Lisa and Jen started arguing over who dropped the ball on keeping me in check, while Mia texted furiously and Ethan smeared paint on the tarp like it was finger paint. I stood there, the chair dripping beside me, wondering how a DIY project had turned into a family war zone. That's when Cal showed up again. He knocked on the garage frame, casual as you please, holding a coffee cup in each hand. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," he said, oblivious to the chaos. Lisa froze. Jen's jaw dropped. Mia actually looked up from her phone. "Who's this?" Jen demanded, her voice icy. "Cal," he said, extending a cup to me with that damn grin. "I see I've walked into something. You have no idea," I said, taking the coffee. The garage went silent, everyone staring at him like he was the villain in a soap opera. And me? I just sipped my coffee, wondering how a chair and a charming stranger had turned my life into a battlefield. The silence in the garage didn't last long. Lisa broke it first, her voice sharp enough to cut through the paint fumes. "So, you're the guy who's got Jen thinking mom's selling the house and shacking up with a stranger?" Cal blinked, the coffee cup pausing halfway to his mouth. "I'm what now?" "Don't play dumb," Jen snapped, stepping forward like she was about to interrogate him. "Mrs. Carter from down the street saw you here yesterday, said you were cozying up to Mom. Next thing I know, I'm getting texts about her moving out." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Mrs. Carter? That old busybody? She probably saw us talking for 5 minutes and decided I was eloping." Cal chuckled, low and easy, which only made Jen's glare sharpen. "I assure you, I'm just a neighbor. Moved in last week. Saw your mom painting and thought I'd say hi. No real estate deals or runaway brides here." Lisa crossed her arms, unconvinced. "Then why are you back today? With coffee?" "Because I'm nice?" Cal offered, raising an eyebrow. "And maybe I wanted to see how the chair turned out." Mia snickered from her spot by the tarp. "It turned out like garbage. Look at it." "Mia," I scolded, but she wasn't wrong. The chair was a mess, sage green splattered in chaotic streaks, one leg still unpainted, the whole thing looking like it had been caught in a paint tornado. I sighed, setting my coffee on a workbench. "It's a setback, okay? I'll fix it." "Sure you will," Jen muttered, then turned to Cal. "Look, I don't know who you are, but my mom doesn't need some random guy stirring up trouble. We've got enough going on." "Trouble." Cal tilted his head, still calm as ever. "I brought caffeine, not chaos." Ethan piped up, his sneakers now fully green. "I like him. He's funny." "Ethan, hush," Lisa said, rubbing her temples. "Mom, we're worried about you. This chair, this coffee guy, it's like you're avoiding us." "Avoiding you?" I laughed, but it came out shaky. "You two haven't called me since Thanksgiving. I'm out here trying to make something nice, and suddenly I'm the bad guy." "Thanksgiving was a disaster because of you," Jen shot back. "You kept pushing me and Lisa to sort things out, like we're kids fighting over a toy. Because you were screaming at each other over mashed potatoes." I countered. "And now you're ganging up on me over a chair?" Cal cleared his throat, stepping back. "Maybe I should." "No, stay," I said, sharper than I meant. "You're the only one here not yelling at me." That shut them up for a second. Lisa's mouth tightened, Jen's eyes narrowed, and Mia whispered something to Ethan that made him giggle. The garage felt like a pressure cooker, and I was the lid about to blow. Then the phone rang. My ancient landline, hooked up in the corner of the garage, blared to life. Everyone jumped, even Cal. I stomped over, paint-streaked hands fumbling with the receiver. "What?" "It's Barb," came the voice on the other end, my oldest friend, nosy as ever. "You okay?" "Mrs. Carter's telling everyone you've got a man in your garage and your kids are staging an intervention." "Oh, for the love of..." I slammed the phone down, spinning back to face my family. "Great. Now the whole neighborhood thinks I'm in a soap opera." "Maybe you are," Jen said, smirking despite herself. "You've got the mysterious stranger and everything." Cal raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'm flattered, but I'm just here for the paint show." "Some show," Lisa muttered, eyeing the chair. "Mom, why is this so important to you?" "It's just furniture," I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. How could I explain it? That chair wasn't just furniture. It was me proving I could still make something good, something mine, after months of feeling like I was fading into the background of their lives. But before I could say anything, Ethan darted forward, grabbed a paintbrush from the workbench, and swiped it across the chair's backrest. Ethan, Jen, and I yelled in unison. A fresh streak of green slashed across the wood, dripping onto the tarp. He froze, wide-eyed, then dropped the brush and bolted behind Lisa. See? Jen groaned. This is why we don't visit more. It's chaos. It's not chaos, it's family. I snapped, grabbing the brush. And maybe if you two stop treating me like I'm one step from the nursing home, you'd see I'm still here, still trying. The garage went quiet again, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Cal shifted, sipping his coffee like he was watching a play unfold. Lisa softened, just a little. Mom, we don't think that. We don't know what's going on with you lately. Then ask me. I said, my voice steady now. Instead of listening to Mrs. Carter's gossip or fighting over a chair. Jen sighed, running a hand through her hair. Fine, let's talk. But not here. This place smells like a paint factory. Deal, I said, glancing at Cal. You sticking around for this? He grinned, that melt-through-ice grin. Only if you want me to. I've got a lawn to mow, but I could be persuaded. Persuade him later, Lisa said, steering Ethan toward the house. Let's get inside before Ethan paints the car next. As they filed out, I looked back at the chair, ugly, messy, and somehow still standing. Kind of like me. Cal lingered a moment longer, his eyes catching mine. You've got a hell of a crew, he said. You have no idea, I replied, and for the first time that day, I smiled. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and regret as we all shuffled inside. Jen plopped onto a chair at the table, Lisa leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, and the grandkids, Mia and Ethan, immediately raided the cookie jar like it was their last meal. I set the coffee Cal had given me on the counter, still warm, and tried to ignore the way my hands shook. Cal had waved goodbye from the garage, promising to check in later, and I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed he wasn't here for this. Okay, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down like I was about to negotiate a peace treaty. Let's talk. No yelling, no running off, just us. Lisa snorted. Good luck with that. Lisa, Jen warned, but there was no heat in it. She looked tired, her shoulders slumping like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long. Mom's right. We need to figure this out. Figure what out? I asked, keeping my voice even. Why you think I'm selling the house? Why you're mad at me for painting a chair? Or why we can't get through a holiday without a screaming match? All of it, Jen said, picking at a scratch on the table. You've been different lately. Quiet. And then this chair thing. It's like you're obsessed. Obsessed? I laughed, but it sounded hollow. It's a project, Jen. Something to keep my hands busy. You two have your lives, the kids, your jobs. I'm just trying to... To what? Lisa cut in, her eyes narrowing. Prove something? To who? To myself. I snapped, louder than I meant. The room went still. Mia paused mid-cookie, Ethan's crumbs scattered across his shirt, and both my daughters stared at me like I'd just confessed to a crime. I took a breath, steadying myself. Look, I'm not moving anywhere. I'm not dating some guy I just met. I'm just here. And sometimes it feels like you don't see me unless I'm messing up. Jen frowned, softening a little. That's not true, Mom. We see you. We just don't always know what you're thinking. Then why didn't you call after Thanksgiving? I asked, my voice quieter now. I waited. Weeks went by, and nothing. Lisa shifted, uncomfortable. I thought you were mad at us. You kept pushing us to talk it out that night, and it blew up. Because I hate seeing you fight, I said, leaning forward. You're sisters. You're all I've got, and when you're at each other's throats, it's like I'm losing you both. Ethan piped up, his mouth full. You're not losing me, Grandma. I like your cookies. I couldn't help it. I laughed, a real one this time. Thanks, kiddo. At least someone's on my side. Mia rolled her eyes, but there was a smirk tugging at her lips. You're so dramatic, Grandma. It's just a chair. It's not just a chair, I said, then stopped myself. How could I explain it without sounding ridiculous? That chair was a lifeline, a way to feel useful when the phone didn't ring and the house felt too big. But before I could find the words, the back door swung open. Cal stood there holding a toolbox and looking sheepish. Sorry to barge in. I was fixing my gate, heard raised voices, and thought maybe the chair drama had escalated. Jen groaned. Oh, great. The coffee guy's back. His name's Cal, I said, standing up. And what are you doing here? Checking on you, he said simply, setting the toolbox down. Sounded like World War III from my yard. Lisa smirked. Close enough. You've got good timing, Cal. We're in the middle of a family meltdown. Perfect, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I've got a knack for walking into messes. Anything I can do. Fix my family? I joked, but it came out half serious. He grinned. I'm better with chairs than people, but I'll give it a shot. Mom, seriously, Jen said, ignoring Cal. If you're not selling the house, why is Mrs. Carter saying all this crap? Because she's a gossip with too much time on her hands, I said. And maybe because Cal's been around twice now, and people love a story. Cal raised an eyebrow. Twice makes me a scandal? I need to up my game. Ethan giggled, crumbs flying. You're funny, coffee guy. See? I'm winning someone over, Cal said, winking at me. My stomach did that flip again, and I cursed myself for it. This wasn't the time. Lisa sighed, pushing off the counter. Okay, fine. No house sale, no secret boyfriend. But Mom, you've got to talk to us. We're not mind readers. Fair, I said, nodding. But you've got to stop assuming I'm falling apart every time I pick up a paintbrush. Deal, Jen said, then glanced at Cal. And you, stop feeding the rumor mill. Cross my heart, he said, making the motion with a grin that was entirely too charming. The tension eased just a little. Mia grabbed another cookie. Ethan kicked his green-stained sneakers against the chair, and Lisa started rinsing out my coffee mug like it was a peace offering. Cal lingered, watching me with those steady eyes, and I wondered if he was part of the chaos or part of the fix. Let's go look at that chair, I said, standing. Maybe we can salvage it together. Together? Jen asked, skeptical. Yeah, I said, meeting her eyes, then Lisa's. All of us. If you're up for it. Lisa shrugged. As long as Ethan doesn't paint the walls. No promises, Ethan said, grinning like a little gremlin. Cal picked up his toolbox. I've got sandpaper and a steady hand. Lead the way. As we headed back to the garage, I felt the weight lift just a bit. The chair was still a mess, my family was still a handful, and Cal was still a wild card, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't facing it alone. The garage smelled like paint and second chances as we crowded around the chair. It sat there, defiant in its ugliness, green streaks slashing across the wood like some abstract art gone wrong. I handed Cal a piece of sandpaper. Lisa grabbed a rag, and Jen reluctantly picked up a spare brush. Mia slumped against the workbench, scrolling on her phone, while Ethan bounced around like he'd just downed a gallon of sugar. Let's see if we can tame this beast, I said, rubbing the sandpaper over a particularly thick glob of paint. The rough scrape of it was oddly satisfying, like I was smoothing out more than just the chair. Cal worked beside me, his hands steady as he sanded down the backrest. You've got a good eye for this, he said, glancing my way. Under all this mess, it's a solid piece. Flattery won't fix it faster, I teased, but I felt a warmth creep up my neck. Lisa caught my eye and smirked, like she'd just uncovered a state secret. Mom, are you blushing? She asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm not blushing, I said, sanding harder. It's the fumes. Sure it is, Jen muttered, dipping her brush into a fresh can of paint I'd pulled from the shelf. This one a soft gray, a redo from the sage green disaster. Just don't trip over yourself for the coffee guy. His name's Cal. Ethan chimed in, snatching a brush and waving it like a sword. And he's cool. Thank you, Ethan, Cal said, ruffling the kid's hair. At least one of you thinks I'm not the enemy. You're still on probation, Jen said, but there was a flicker of a smile as she swiped gray paint over the chair's armrest. Let's see if you can keep up. The garage filled with the sound of sanding, brushing, and the occasional groan from Mia. This is so boring, she whined. Why can't we just buy a new chair? Because, I said, wiping sweat from my brow, sometimes fixing something old is better than starting over. Plus, it's cheaper. Grandma's cheap, Ethan stage whispered to Cal, who laughed so hard he nearly dropped his sandpaper. Resourceful, I corrected, flicking a speck of paint at Ethan. He squealed and retaliated, smearing gray across my jeans. Ethan, oops, he said, grinning like a little devil. Lisa grabbed him by the collar before he could escalate it into a full paint war. Enough, Picasso, she said, but she was smiling too. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in months, and it hit me like a punch. How much I'd missed this. All of us together, messy and loud and alive. Jen paused, her brush hovering over the chair. You know, this isn't half bad, she said, tilting her head. The gray was smoothing out the chaos, turning the chair into something almost elegant. Maybe you're onto something, Mom. High praise, I said, nudging her with my elbow. Don't strain yourself. She rolled her eyes, but it was playful, not sharp. For a minute, it felt like old times, before the fights, before the silence, when we'd tackle projects together just for the hell of it. Cal caught my eye again, and I wondered if he saw it too, the way this chair was stitching us back together, one brushstroke at a time. Then the doorbell rang. We all froze, paintbrushes dripping, like we'd been caught doing something illegal. Who's that? Lisa asked, wiping her hands on a rag. Probably Mrs. Carter with her binoculars, I grumbled, heading for the house. I'll handle it. But it wasn't Mrs. Carter. It was Barb, my friend from the phone call, standing on the porch with a bottle of wine and a grin that spelled trouble. I heard the neighborhood's buzzing about your little garage party, she said, peering past me. Thought I'd bring reinforcements. Barb, this isn't a party, I said, stepping aside as she barged in anyway. We're just painting a chair with a hot silver fox and your whole crew, she finished, spotting Cal as we walked back to the garage. Oh, honey, this is better than TV. Barb, I hissed, but it was too late. She was already shaking Cal's hand, introducing herself like she was the host of this circus. Nice to meet you, Cal said, clearly amused. I take it you're the voice of reason around here? Ha, more like the voice of chaos, Barb said, popping the wine open with a corkscrew she'd pulled from her purse. Who wants a glass? Me, Mia said, perking up. Nice try, Jen shot back, snatching the bottle from Barb. You're 12. 13 next month, Mia muttered, slumping again. Barb handed me a glass anyway, ignoring the chaos. To the chair, she toasted, clinking my glass. And to whatever's going on with you and Mr. Coffee over there. There's nothing going on, I said, but my voice wavered, and Lisa's smirk grew wider. Sure, Mom, she said, dipping her brush back into the paint. Keep telling yourself that. Cal just grinned, sanding away like he hadn't heard a thing. The chair was starting to look like something, maybe not perfect, but ours. Barb settled onto a stool, sipping her wine and narrating our every move like a sports commentator, while Ethan accidentally painted a gray stripe across Lisa's arm, sparking a mock chase around the garage. Hold still. Lisa laughed, grabbing him and tickling him until he shrieked. Jen joined in, smearing a dab of paint on Ethan's nose, and even Mia cracked a smile, snapping a photo for her endless feed. I stood back, glass in hand, watching them, my loud, messy, ridiculous family. Cal stepped up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. You got something special here, he said quietly. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. I do. The chair wasn't done. Not yet, but it didn't matter. For the first time in too long, we were all in the same room, laughing instead of fighting. And Cal? He was still a wild card, but I was starting to think I didn't mind. The garage was a battlefield of paint cans, laughter, and spilled wine by the time the sun dipped low. The chair stood in the center, transformed, its gray coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the chaos of sage green sanded away into something sturdy and proud. I ran my hand over the backrest, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers, and couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect. There were still faint streaks if you looked close, a wobble in one leg, but it was ours. "Looks like a real chair now," Jen said, stepping back with her hands on her hips. She'd gotten gray paint in her hair somehow, and it made her look younger, softer, like the girl who used to help me repaint the porch swing years ago. "High praise from the critic," I said, nudging her. She nudged me back, and for once, it didn't feel like a challenge. Lisa wiped her hands on a rag, Ethan dangling from her arm like a monkey. "I'm calling it a win," she said. "No one's yelling, and Ethan only painted half the garage." "Half's generous," Cal said, pointing to the tarp, now a masterpiece of gray and green splatters. Ethan grinned, unrepentant, and darted over to high-five Cal. "Teamwork," Ethan declared, and Cal laughed, returning the high-five with a flourish. Barb, perched on her stool with her third glass of wine, raised it in a toast. To Dot's DIY disaster turned triumph, and to the hot neighbor who didn't run screaming. "Barb," I groaned, but I couldn't hide my grin. Cal just tipped an imaginary hat, unfazed, and I caught myself staring a little too long at the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Mia snapped a photo of the chair, finally putting her phone to good use. "This is actually kinda cool," she admitted, zooming in. "I might post it." "Wow, a compliment," I said, clutching my chest in mock shock. "I need to sit down." "You're already sitting on a masterpiece," Jen said, gesturing to the chair. "Go ahead, test it out." I hesitated, then lowered myself onto the seat. It held, no creaks, no wobbles, just solid wood beneath me. The room erupted in exaggerated cheers, Ethan clapping like I'd just won a gold medal. "Grandma's the champ," he yelled, and Lisa shushed him, laughing. "It's not bad," I said, leaning back. "We did good." "We," Lisa teased, arching an eyebrow. "You mean you and Cal?" "Oh, come on," I said, waving her off, but my cheeks burned again, and Barb cackled like a witch over her cauldron. "Leave her alone," Jen said, surprising me. "She's allowed to have a friend. Even a suspiciously charming one." "Suspiciously charming?" Cal echoed, leaning against the workbench. "I'll take it. Better than coffee guy." "Barely," Jen shot back, but she was smiling now, and it felt like a truce. The air in the garage softened, the tension unraveling like a knot finally coming loose. We stood there, surrounded by paint cans and crumbs, and I realized how long it had been since we'd all just been. No arguments, no storming out, just us, messy, loud, and together. "So," Cal said, breaking the quiet, "what's next? Another chair? A table? I've got tools and time." "Don't tempt her," Lisa warned, but she was grinning too. "She'll have us building a whole dining set." "Maybe I will," I said, standing up. "But first, I'm starving. Who's up for pizza?" "Me," Ethan shouted, predictably, and Mia nodded, still glued to her phone but clearly listening. "I could eat," Jen said, then glanced at Cal. "You sticking around, or are you done with us crazies?" Cal looked at me, his grin softening into something quieter, warmer. "If Dot's okay with it, I'm in." "Dot's okay with it," I said, too quick, and Lisa's smirk returned full force. I ignored her, grabbing my phone to order. "Pepperoni and extra cheese, right?" "Always," Ethan said, climbing onto the workbench like it was a jungle gym. Lisa pulled him down, and Barb offered to pour more wine, which Jen promptly confiscated again. The pizza arrived 20 minutes later, and we sprawled out in the living room, Ethan on the floor with a slice bigger than his head, Mia cross-legged on the couch, Jen and Lisa sharing the armchair like they used to when they were kids. Cal sat next to me on the love seat, close enough that our knees brushed, and I pretended not to notice how it made my pulse jump. Barb, ever the instigator, perched on the ottoman and raised her glass again. To family, she said, and to chairs that don't suck. Here, here, Cal said, clinking his soda can against her glass. The kids giggled, and Jen rolled her eyes, but she toasted too. As we ate, the conversation drifted, Lisa complaining about work, Jen telling a story about Ethan's latest school antics, Mia chiming in with some incomprehensible slang that made us all laugh. Cal listened, chiming in with dry one-liners that had even Jen cracking up, and I felt something settle in my chest, warm and steady. Later, after the boxes were empty and Barb had stumbled home, Jen and Lisa lingered in the kitchen, helping me clean up. The grandkids were sprawled on the couch, half asleep, and Cal was out in the garage, packing up his tools. "You okay, Mom?" Jen asked, drying a glass. "Really?" I nodded, meeting her eyes.
"Yeah."
"Are you?" She shrugged, then smiled, a real one. "Getting there." Lisa hugged me from behind, quick and fierce. "We'll call more. Promise." "Good," I said, squeezing her arm. "I'm holding you to it." They left with the kids in tow, waving from the driveway, and I stepped back into the garage. Cal was there, toolbox in hand, the chair gleaming under the lights. "Nice night," he said, nodding toward the house. "You've got a good bunch." "They're a handful," I said, leaning against the workbench. "But yeah, they're mine." He stepped closer, his voice dropping.
"And me?"
"Am I still on probation?" I laughed, light and easy. "Maybe, but you're growing on me." "Good to know," he said, that grin flashing again. "See you tomorrow? I've got a fence that needs painting, and I could use a partner." "Only if you bring coffee," I said, matching his smile. "Deal," he said, and with a wave, he headed down the street, toolbox swinging. I stood there a minute longer, looking at the chair, our chair. It wasn't just wood and paint anymore. It was a fight, a fix, a family coming back together. And maybe, just maybe, a little something new starting too.